of it. When Sherry was out of town, and my wife called me and said, "You gotta get over to your mom's right now because I think she's gonna die within the next few hours." And so I rushed over there. I walked in and everybody says, "Yep, she's about to go. She's gonna die any minute." So I go in the back room and everybody's huddled around her and she's just completely comatose and talking like she's seeing people from the past. And so we're expecting her to go any minute, and my brother-in-law says, "Maybe we should give her a blessing." And I'm thinking, well, I think she wants to go. We should just let her go. So. Anyway, so we'll give her a blessing of comfort. So we gave her a blessing, put our hands on her head, and as soon as we took our hands off, after she'd been completely out of it, she lifted her head up and said, "Well, am I going to die or not?" And then she was fine. So,
she was fine.
Who knows? The first presidency said, "Motherhood is near divinity. It is the highest, holiest service to be assumed by mankind. It places her who honors its holy calling and service next to angels." I am grateful for Mother and happy to be able to speak on her behalf today. My mother did grow up in New Mexico, and one thing Sherry did say is that trading post was built on Route 66, and it was a very successful trading post, but when they built the interstate through New Mexico and bypassed Route 66, it put the trading post out of business. So. And her dad could speak fluent Navajo, and a lot of the local Navajos would come into the trading post to speak with my granddad because he could help them with words that they couldn't remember how to speak in Navajo. So that was a pretty cool story. And then her brother Nez would only speak Navajo when he went to an English-speaking school. And so for the first few years, they were very upset with him because he would never speak English. He would only speak in Navajo. And he never spoke Navajo again until he was an old man, and then he got cancer and was dying. And when we went to visit him, he just started speaking in Navajo again. And she was talking to Jill, and she thought, "What is he talking about?" But he was speaking in Navajo, so it was pretty interesting. Well, let's see here. As a child growing up with my mom, yes, sometimes she wasn't that loving, but in my opinion, she was pretty amazing. She did a lot for us kids, and as Sherry said, she was a very hard worker. I just remember her always working. She was always washing and folding her clothes. She always ironed my shirts, my pants. I mean, everything was always ironed. In fact, when I moved out of the house, I ironed everything for several years before I realized you didn't have to iron everything. And then I realized you didn't have to iron anything. So. I was tall and lanky back then and couldn't find any pants to fit, so she made all my pants. And she made shirts and suit jackets and all kinds of stuff for me. Sometimes wasn't quite my style, but it was good stuff. She had a big garden she took care of, and like Sherry said, we had a lot of chickens that we raised, and she would process those and freeze those every year. And my dad would bring home game all the time, and she would get her knife out and butcher that up and freeze it. I mean, I don't think my dad cut up anything, but she cut up everything, so I can't get my wife to do any of that. My brother and I would catch fish and bring them home, and she would skin those fish out in just like seconds with a fillet, with a big knife that looked like a 2-foot saber. I don't even know how she did it. I still don't know how, but it was pretty wild to watch. She would spend all day working in the yard. She was always behind an ironing board, and she was just a worker bee. L. Tom Perry said that motherhood is the noblest and greatest of all callings. Well, later in life, she went through a nasty divorce. And she lost her home, the home that she raised her kids in, and many of those hardships she experienced in life hardened her a little bit. Although she was always a little bit hard, but she moved around after trying to find a place she could call home. Finally ended up out here on the west of town in a place that she loved. And she was on 13 acres, and she made that place beautiful over the years. So like I said, later in life, she hardened a little bit and got tough, and she no longer stood by and let anyone get away with anything that bothered her. She was done taking crap from anybody. And if you knew my mother and wanted to characterize her, you could say that she was the sweetest woman you ever met. Or you might say she was the honoriest woman you ever met. And you'd both be right. So, my mother taught me a lot. She taught me how to respect women. She taught me the law of tithing. She taught me how to work hard. She taught us how to make amazing Mexican food, and a lot more. There are a few funny stories I was going to tell about her. One day she called me in a panic and said, "Son, you need to come out here right now and kill this raccoon that's getting in my yard." And I replied, "Mom, why do you think I need to come out and kill that raccoon? It's probably not hurting anything, is it?" And she said, "Yes, it's crapping all over the yard and making a huge mess." So I went out there, and she showed me where he'd been doing his business in the yard. And so I thought, well, we don't know where the raccoon is, so I guess I'll just set a trap for it. So I set it at her back door so that if she opened the door, she'd be able to see it in the trap and let me know. I said, as soon as you see something in this trap, call me and I'll come out and take care of it. So 3 days went by and I thought, what the heck? I thought for sure I'd get to that raccoon immediately. And so finally 3 days went by and she called me. She said, "Son, you need to come out here and take care of this raccoon." She said, "It's in that trap and I can't kill it." I said, "Okay, well, when did we catch it?" She goes, 3 days ago, and I've been trying to kill it ever since. I won't even mention how she tried to kill it. Mom was a fanatic about her yard. We took turns mowing it over the years, Sean and I, and after a while I thought, man, I've got better things to do than go out there and mow that lawn all the time, because it was a huge yard. And it was on 13 acres. It didn't start out that big, but over the years she just kept adding more grass and adding more grass, planting more trees and planting more trees and more shrubs. And so when you went out and mowed, it was like an obstacle course. It was very difficult to mow. And if you mowed over any little shrub or bush or anything, she was very upset about it. So anyway, I thought, I'm going to hire a professional lawn care company to come out and take care of that lawn. And so I hired this guy that I knew that had a very thriving business here in town. And they mowed out there for about 3 weeks. And then he called me up one day and said, "Hey, Leonard, we're not going to be able to mow your mom's lawn anymore." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, I sent 2 of my girls out there and they called me up crying and they said, 'You're so mean, you just can't come back down.'" So I found out they'd used a weed eater around the trees, cut the grass a little too short with the weed eater, and she didn't like weed eaters. She liked to do it by hand with scissors or something. So anyway, so I went back to mowing, and then there was a guy in our neighborhood that took care of yards. So I thought, well, I'll hire this guy to go out there and do it. So he was really good. So I sent him out there, and he did a great job for like 2 or 3 mows, and then he got in some wet grass and spun out a little bit, left a few tracks, and then he got sent home too. So I went through several other companies, and none of them worked. So I was about to give up, and then Sean had this guy that worked for him, an elderly guy that was very good at everything he did. And so I thought, well, that got to be perfect. So sent him out there, and my mom really loved this guy. He was great. He picked up all the branches, mowed the yard, he did all kinds of stuff. And then one day she just fired him. And he came back and he looked at Sean and He said, I've been working for 60 years and I've never been fired for this. Oh, gosh. One time I had a bunch of family in town. They all decided to go out and help Mom with her yard. And so they were out picking up leaves, trimming trees, which is a no-no, trimming around the bushes, mowing, doing everything. Mom was inside while they were doing this. And then when she came out, the first thing she noticed was a tree that they trimmed. And I think, Cody, did you trim that tree? Who did trim that tree? Anyway, she came out and saw that tree trim, and she was just furious. It needed trimming, but she didn't like it. And she thought Kathy did it. And she said, Kathy did it just to make her mad. And she was mad for months about that. And I told her, I said, Kathy didn't do it. What?
Years.
And you couldn't convince her that Kathy didn't do it, that she didn't do it out of spite. So, one of her greatest loves was Coca-Cola. She didn't go anywhere without a case of Coca-Cola, and she wouldn't drink anything but Coke. We used to go on family trips to West Yellowstone. We'd go on some hikes, and she would always have this big 41 Magnum 6-shooter strapped to her side wherever we went. One day, Aaron just told me this the other day, she dropped off Aaron to a 6th grade birthday party. And she said, before she let her out of the car, she said, there's not going to be any pot there, is there? Anyway, I want to tell a little story about a mother. A group of young college students were helping measure range damage after a wildfire raged across the prairie outside their university town. As they walked over the expanse of the blackened earth, they noticed a cluster of small, smoldering mounds. One of the volunteers was particularly interested in the undefinable heaps and asked one or more of the experienced range managers what it was. This veteran of many range fires replied that he had seen this phenomenon a few occasions and suggested that the young man turn over one of the piles. He did. To his great surprise, several sage-grouse chicks ran out from under the upturned mound. He was fascinated. How incredible, he thought, that these little chicks had known to find and run underneath this mysterious shelter. The young man asked what the mound was and how the chicks knew to take refuge there. To his amazement, he was told that the smoldering heap was the remains of their mother. And when there is danger, the mother hen instinctively calls out to her young ones and stretches out her wings for them to run under and find protection in her embrace. She was their only hope for safety and willing to risk her own life. Even when the pain reached its most unbearable moment, when she could have easily flown away to start another family, or on another day, she made herself stay through the raging flames. Honestly, I have no idea how my mom put up with me when I was younger, because I was always in trouble. And some of it was pretty serious. And if anybody could have given up on somebody, she could, but she never did. She was always there, she was always patient, and she was always loving. And I am truly grateful for my mother. I'm grateful for all those who took care of her in these last few years, Sherry and Sean, and all my sisters, and Elaine and Kathy. I appreciate all your help. Victor Hugo penned these lines. He said, "She broke bread into fragments and gave them to her children, who ate with eagerness. She hath kept none for herself," grumbled the sergeant. "Because she is not hungry," said the soldier. "No," said the sergeant, "because she is a mother." Thank you.